Thank you for listening to Baskets of Knowledge.
Yeah, we hope that you found something useful to put into your basket of knowledge. And as we said before, remember to put something little into your baskets of knowledge every week. And as always, feel free to like, comment, and share this podcast. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Kia ora koutou, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Baskets of Knowledge. Hey, Tane, how are you going this week?
Yeah, good. I've had a bit of a slump at the start of the week, but I'm starting to get on the up. And I guess now that it's close to graduation and stuff like that, it's good to have a few positive things to look forward to.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Hey, the whole slump thing I guess, is real for you because you've been on the go for the last 36 to 40 weeks, and then now you have nothing.
Yeah, it's been crazy. I think especially, the first couple of weeks you go, oh, this is nice to slow down and, just be able to be with myself and do things that I want to go do and stuff like that. But I guess after the fact, after that honeymoon period of, oh, this is actually quite nice, you start going, oh, well, now I've got all the time in the world. What do I actually do with it? And again, for me, it's always exercise, but I've been, got into the routine where I go to the gym or go for a run or chuck a footy around before lunch, and then I go, well, I've still got all afternoon. I can't exactly go and exercise again. So it's trying to figure out different ways that I can actually fill that time up in a meaningful way.
That's so crazy. Hey, I always wonder if this is what retirement feels like, where you've been living your life like 40 years and you're doing stuff, and then you go, right, cool, I'm doing nothing the next day. I don't know. I mean, hey, I'm not close enough to find out just yet. Unless they get super, super rich, then I'll be like, okay, cool, see you later.
Yeah.
And what have you learned? What have you learned though in that time there? Because you've obviously gone through it. What's the learning for you?
I guess the learning was just to keep going and just know that you don't have to do all these things. I guess it probably leans into me trying to start my new habits as well around, meditating in the morning and trying to do exercise each day and different things like that. And I guess it's nice to try and get in that routine, and it's nice to try and be perfect, but it's also nice to just recognize that you don't have to do these great things every day, and that sometimes you can just be in a slump. And I guess, yeah, coming from that, it's just how do I pick my moments? And I guess one of the key things I learned from finishing the book was, it's all right to have an off day, just don't repeat the off day, so it's all good to actually have a day off and go, oh, I wasn't actually feeling it, I'll do it again tomorrow. But it's about resetting and just going, okay, I can get back on the horse now and start again.
Yeah, and the book you're talking about is Atomic Habits, right, by James Clear. Yeah. I also just want to pick up a word that you use the word perfect there. And when I do my coaching stuff, I hear the word quite often. And what I tell people is don't let perfect get in the way of good. A lot of times you're trying to find perfect, but you go, cool, when you're trying to find perfection, good doesn't happen. So I think we should get rid of the word perfect, unless you're a marketer. That's a bit different, right? We'll come to that in a second. Awesome. And I think my biggest learning this week was the Spotify wrap up that we did of our podcast. I looking at the data, and I don't know if people have seen my LinkedIn post or the post put up there. Just data doesn't lie, and just seeing how far our podcast has gone and how many it's just grown, which is I guess this is a great place for me to say thank you to all our listeners out there, and also to you, Tane, for joining me on this ride here, which has been really awesome. And I guess, when we think about that, where we started from and what we're doing right now is a whole different ballgame. So my biggest learning is, just reflecting about what we've done, and also about every single guest we've had on here has been pretty amazing. And everyone has taught me something that I've taken away to reflect on. So that was my biggest learning. Again, the biggest learning that is everyone's got a story. And, it's so quick for us to judge people based on first impressions when there's a lot more going on. And I guess the big learning is I'm really glad that we are doing this. And yeah, but a bit of self-praise there. But hey, cool, I'm gonna take that. Talking about learnings and awesomeness and perfection and doing some cool things. This is a great segue to our guest this week. As you know, our listeners out there who've been with us for the whole year, basically, we scour the country and sometimes internationally to find some amazing people. And today's guest is no less amazing. Welcome to our guest, Kat.
Hello, how's it going? Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. Thank you for joining us. Kat, do you want to tell the listeners about who you are and what you're doing at this point in life?
My goodness, that's a lot to wrap up in a couple of seconds.
You can
I
take as
am
long as
Kat.
you want, Cats. You can take as long as you want.
Thank you. We won't take too long because I like to keep it short and snappy, as I feel like most marketers probably want to. I'm Kat. I am a marketing specialist now. I work at the University of Otago, and I'm on a journey of my own self-discovery and also path to try and be a better marketer as much as I can be and understand what it is I'm trying to do in this life. So yeah.
Yeah,
I'm Kat.
and oh, brilliant. Thanks, Kat. And I think that's a great summary, but there's a lot more depth to that. And you forgot to add that you're also a host of your own podcast, which is pretty cool, which we'll talk about later on as well. So, Kat, let's you're doing some awesome stuff right now, but let's talk about where it all started. Let's talk about you as a young person. You didn't go through the conventional system that most young people went through. You went through homeschooling. What is that? What is that like? What was the reason behind that from your family, I guess?
Well, I was in a family of five, and my two brothers were actually 7 and 9 years older than me. So when I came along, my parents had decided to take my two brothers out of primary school and start homeschooling them. So once I came along, I just slotted in, and it was mainly primarily because of being Christian. So my parents were of the Christian faith. And then they kind of witnessed in the primary school that they were at a lot of, I guess, hard elements from particular teachers being hard on those students. So my brother that is still with me actually had dyslexia, and he wasn't able to read even at the age of 7. So my mom was like, hey, let's take you out of school, start homeschooling you to see how this actually goes. And I think within the first 6 months, he was actually reading and writing.
Oh, wow.
So that was awesome. That was a major shift for him, but obviously a lifelong, learning disability in his situation. So yeah, we kind of just got to that point with our family because of Christianity, and then I came along and just slotted into homeschooling element, and here I am today. So
Yeah.
there's probably a
And I
lot more
guess
to get to that, but
Yeah, and I guess at that point in time, you knew no different because it wasn't like, some people go into school, like your brothers, they went into a school and they had to be homeschooled, so the adjustment would be a little bit different for them. Whereas you just slotted in because that was the life that you knew,
yeah.
which I guess is awesome at that age there. But great, going to homeschool, well, being homeschooled, did you, was there a point where you go, actually, why don't I have any of the other stuff that say your friends that you notice, say your other family friends, you go, hey, we're going to go to blah, 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 blah. You're like, oh, I'm not doing that there. Did that
I
ever come
know,
up?
yeah. So there was definitely some isolation with homeschooling in the social sense. I think it was particularly hard, more so in the later years, not so much when I was a kid.
Yes.
I felt like I wasn't probably one of those normal kids in the sense of being one homeschooled, didn't have those experiences, but I didn't actually act per se like a kid. I had to grow up at a very young age because of family circumstances. So being around adults at a very young age was quite normal for me. And then what I actually did in the social sense was actually get into marching. And that's how I actually had my social side with friends. And I actually did that for 10 years. So I hopefully was quite a good marcher by the end of it. We actually were champions. A little plug there. But that's how I had my social side. And I still have actually my best friend to this day from being able to do marching and have that element. But alongside that, there was homeschool groups that we actually were a part of. But eventually I just didn't want to be a part of it anymore because I just didn't feel like I actually fit within that kind of mold that particular homeschool families were kind of isolated into just because of religion in itself. Because personally, I'm not actually religious anymore. So kind of went away from that area, but that's how I had my social side come out.
That's there's a couple of things there which with lots of layers there. And I guess the first layer for you was, you found your social, I guess your social connection in marching. And how did you get involved in marching? Because that's pretty random, right? For a young person. Well, I guess it is popular in New Zealand, but for some people, why marching?
So my two next door neighbors, who were my childhood friends, were actually doing marching, and the reason why they actually got into it was because there was like tryouts at the school within my area, and they were like, "Hey, why don't you come along and see what it's like?" And tried out, I guess, per se, and actually really enjoyed it and met a couple of kids that way. But it was very low key when I first started out in it because we weren't good. And we would literally meet up at the local school, do practice and things like that, and just be able to get amongst it and do it that way. So that's how I got into marching with that sense. So it was my next door neighbors that actually got me into it. So I guess in that sense, I was also a very social child, being like, hey, there's next door neighbors, let's go annoy them. And that's how I made friends as well.
And that's so cool, because I don't know if you've ever heard the last lecture by Randy Pausch, and he talks about when you have young people in your family, as playing sports or an activity is what you want to do, but he used the term head fake. The head fake basically goes, we go and do these things here, but you're actually doing these things here because you want to socialize. You learn the skills, blah blah blah, but at the same time you're going to be socializing with other people, how to act around other humans, and how to learn about your own social awareness, which I guess for you was marching, and I guess for you, Tanya, that was your rugby league.
Yeah, definitely. And that's probably where I got a lot of my confidence to actually be outgoing. I found probably growing up, particularly, I was quite introverted and was much more of a listener. And, I'd contribute where I needed to, but I wouldn't go out of my way to have my opinion heard. And so once I found rugby league, especially, I found this confidence and just this natural ability to speak on the field. And I think there are just people out there who, they find their way of being able to communicate in a different way, whether it's, for me, rugby league, some people it's music, some people it's something completely different, and it's just another way to give them a voice without putting the pressure on them to be like, okay, here's your chance to have your say.
Yeah, and I think we see that quite a bit, when you see young people, or actually human adults, actually not just young people, adults, when they're in their jam, whether it's orchestra or marching or sport or whatever, when they're in that element where they feel safe because everyone's seeing the same thing, it's a whole different persona comes out, which is just human nature. And I think we forget that, human nature is all about your social setting, which is pretty cool. Religion. So you obviously grew up in a Christian family, and at what age did you start going, hey, wait a minute, this is not my vibe? Was there a specific moment or a specific trigger point that young cat was like, actually, I'm going to question this?
Yeah, there definitely was. My parents were going through a rough patch when I was 8 years old, and we were kind of going to see our dad on the side, but mainly at church. And my mum actually took herself out of the community at our church around that time. And I was just like, it doesn't make sense if they're trying to push the element of happy family, happy life, like perfect elements that, you've got to be a good Christian wife or a good Christian father and good Christian children. And just witnessing my parents be in that particular state, it just started to open up my eyes around the religion side of things, because the families that were actually a part of our church were starting to judge our family because of that. And at 8 years old, I was like, why are you judging us? Like, we're just, the same old people that we are. So it got to a point where I was like, this doesn't make sense. And then obviously once I got it more into, my teen years, I was like, this religion element isn't my thing. And I completely pushed it away for so long. And I think that definitely was detrimental to my own personal growth as well, because I see myself as a spiritual person now, but not necessarily in the Christian sense. But it held me back in a lot of ways of understanding myself, because I didn't tap into those areas. So it was a struggle to, move through. But I eventually got to that point where hopefully I'm guiding myself forward and understanding the spiritual elements that I personally need for my soul, but in a religious sense, that's not for Christianity.
No, and that's really a great awareness at the age of 8. At the age of 8, most of us are like, okay, cool, whatever mom and dad are doing, cool, happy days, or whatever our fun or our family are doing, we're just gonna accept it. And then only when you become teenagers, you go, actually, wait a minute, what's going on here? I'm going to be a rebel now. And the word, it's interesting, the word rebel, right? Because it's in your teenage years when you start actually thinking of having heavy on thoughts. And sometimes those thoughts are not obviously all good because the brain is still not developing. But it's a great time for us as young people, as humans, to start thinking about, okay, what else is out there in the culturescape? And for some people, they accept where they are, and this is great. And some people start questioning, as you did. And I guess as a teenager, this is when life started changing for you quite a bit, because were you homeschooled as a teenager as well, or did you go into mainstream school?
I was.
Yep.
No, so homeschooled from primary, intermediate, and high school. And from 17 to 18, I did community college to get my NCAs so that I could go
Yeah.
into tertiary education. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess you mentioned as a young person, it was all fine, whatever. But when you get to teenage years, things change for you because the social interaction changes quite a bit for you. And so, how did you navigate that? I mean, you did the marching, which is cool. But and now you here's young cat here, realizing a homeschooling ? Religion ? And just teenage life ? As well. What is that like for you going through that there?
It was very confusing. I was absolutely begging my parents to send me to school. So I was trying to be like, hey, send me to this, Christian school for all girls, so there's no boys. And that wasn't even a selling card for my dad to allow me to go to do that. But I think there was a lot of bigger issues within our family that were holding us back from being able to go into that sense of going into an institution away from just the family institution, I guess. So it was a struggle. And I definitely went through phases of questioning my family, questioning myself, and questioning, why I was probably placed into this kind of family where I was so isolated in the sense of not having a community within a school and having those elements of being opened up to so many opportunities, because it was quite isolating. And I definitely had to push through those barriers to get to where I am today, which I think is something that is a blessing in disguise, but definitely wasn't at the time, because I had to work a lot harder to get through my study in terms of tertiary education.
Yeah, and that's so awesome, because that's my next thought process was, there's got to be positives as well. We've spoken about the downfalls, but hey, there's got to be some positives that you go, actually, wait a minute, this is really cool. And what are those positives that are for you? You mentioned that, hey, the hardness made you a better person to do what you need to do. Any other positives that stand out for you that you go, hey, this is actually quite cool. I wouldn't have had this if I went to a normal school.
I think to some degree, and it's quite interesting, everyone that I've met through from 18 to now 26 are quite surprised at how my social battery is, in the sense of being outgoing and also a little bit more, not in like adventurous or endearing or anything like that, but I'm putting myself out there because I see an opportunity. If I don't say yes to certain things, like even this podcast, it doesn't open up to conversations to what we're having in day to day. And I think going through the positives and the fact that I was homeschooled, I did have moments where I could stop and fully analyze and understand the topics that I was actually studying, to also get to the point where I decided on I wanted to do marketing. And why did I want to do marketing? And I wanted to understand the psyche around a consumer and things like that. And I probably only got that because my mum opened up a world where it was just her and I felt so comfortable asking her certain questions. And sometimes they were probably super uncomfortable for her because I was a very open book child. I was like, why is the world like this? Why is certain things happening? And I probably to some degree that was also to my detriment, because mum was like, shh, just it is what it is, just go with the flow. And I think the positives, definitely hopefully outweigh the negatives, I think, in the sense of where I've gotten to today. And with my education, it's been a lifelong thing. And I think whilst I was actually studying at Otago Polytechnic, it fell on the back burner in the sense of my own personal development. But my my actual education towards, you know, my career and everything was the forefront, but it got me to understand more parts of my own being and also the industry that I work in.
Yeah, and that's really beautiful because, you know, having that time with your mum, basically your mum is around you the whole time, which means that your relationship is a little bit different, you know, because they're your teacher, but they're also your mum, and a mum is a teacher at the end of the day, right? Essentially. And the fact that you're able to ask all those questions without fear of judgment or fear of anything, even the mum might go, it is the way it is, you're comfortable to be able to do that, which is pretty special, you know.
Oh, and there were certain moments where we got off on the wrong foot.
Oh, I
Believe
can
me.
imagine that.
Like,
I can imagine
usually in my
that.
teen years, I was like, "You don't understand me, mum." Like all of those teen problems. But yeah, I think having that open transparency was probably something nice to have as a teacher and as a mother.
Beautiful. And then you decide you want to do tertiary. What is your, because you did mention before marketing or something that popped up as you were doing this year.
Mhm.
So what was your push then to go, cool, I need to get my NCA at that point in time? Because you obviously been homeschooled the whole time.
Mhm.
The university thing is not really in the curriculum. It's not really spoken of.
No.
How was that? What is that like for you? Actually, wait a minute. There's a lot more out there that any tertiary that you wanted to do.
Mm. Um, I think the turning point was around 17 when I was just analyzing our family situation. So I'm actually the first one out of my family to go and get a bachelor's degree.
Well done.
Thank you. But it was very daunting in the sense of understanding what I actually wanted to do, because I felt like there was so much more than what my family had presented to me as a normal, you know, upbringing or a normal way of going about a career. And I think, from 17, it was the point where I was like, okay, what do I actually want to do with my life? I don't want to just stay working in hospitality, which I did for quite a while as a barista. And I liked the element of customer service and sales, but I didn't want to do that in the sense of retail or, you know, hospitality. So I started looking at what those particular key skills entailed into the career of marketing. And once I actually delved into understanding what marketing could offer, then it got to a point of actually like, cool, there's actually psychology-based learning behind this and understanding the consumer and getting them to a point where they can actually connect with a brand and not just a product, being like, this serves a purpose. You feed into the experience rather than just giving them a unfulfilling, you know, product or service. So that kind of got me to that point. And it was, I haven't looked back with that either.
Oh, brilliant. So then you now step from that into community college. What is that like for you?
Community college was a complete shell shock experience because one, we went there because my family wasn't well off. So it was a free course to do and get my NCAs. And with that, a lot of students from high school obviously would leave high school and go to community college to continue that, but in probably a less regiment experience. So I had to navigate the fact of, you know, particular teenagers not being so well rounded or like the head screwed on. So I think that was one challenge that I had to overcome was, you know, the judgment, and also, and then you know, students would probably actually go through that at such an early age with, you know, being in primary, intermediate, but I went through that at 17. So it was a major shell shock for me to experience particular people judging me for what I look like, judging me for being interested in what I was actually studying and wanting to get through, you know, the next hurdle to get to where I wanted to go. So community college was a absolute experience, but it's one of those things that was a stepping stone to where I got to.
Yeah, and I can just imagine, you know, going from homeschool to actual a learning environment where you're in a classroom with, like you said, you know, community college has people that want to be there or people that don't want to be there, and they're just doing it because they have to do it, not because they want to do it. So what is that like for you now? Because you're now going against the grain from what your family were believing, you know, for the whole homeschool thing. Was to say, how did they react to that? Were they like, cool, Kat, you're going to go do your thing, happy days, off you go? Or were they like, oh, Kat, what's going on here? What, you're going to be in the same class as boys? What is going on here?
So at 17, I was the driving force of wanting to go do this. My proposal, I guess, I put forward to my mum was I'm going to get my NCAs, and this is going to get me to the next point in going to study marketing. And I think my mum was for it because she could see the path that I was wanting to go down. So she helped me get to that point of obviously, enrolling and getting prepared to go to community college and actually, get my NCA and everything. My dad wasn't so much on my side, and I think that was one of the harder things in our personal relationship, navigating, because he didn't see the value in that. But again, personality differences, religion elements coming into play. So it was something that I knew I needed for myself. So I really stood my ground. And it was one of those moments, I guess, a lot of people have either in their teens or in their 20s or anything, that they're standing their ground and they know what's kind of right for them. And being 17, you're such on the cusp of, being in adulthood, and you're like, I know what's right for me, mum, like, just let me go and seek what I need to do. So, but in my situation, it was, my dad was somewhat trying to hold me back and just seeing things very differently. And I guess to some degree, that was his parenting style, but it was not what I needed, clearly, because, it was a better thing that, got me out. And I had some trials and tribulations with it, but
Yeah, and I think I think it's I think thank you for sharing that, because it's quite it's I guess it would be emotive as well for you to go through that there. And I guess this is a reminder that everybody's different. There's an assumption that everybody thinks the same, an assumption that, hey, everyone should try to do the best that they can, whatever their best is, as opposed to what my best is. And sometimes we come across families or people that think about their best as opposed to the other person's best. And I guess we see it in workplaces as well. In workplaces are basically families, and in some workplaces you have an amazing team that goes to that helps you do your best to get the overall best of the actual organization. And sometimes you have some people that just want their best, and they'll do anything to put you down so that they're the best. It's just human nature, which is pretty complex, as you said. Complex trial and tribulations goes everywhere. And I guess, Tana, you would have also seen that in your year as a subwarden. I mean, not to throw it under the bus, but working in teams is challenging.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I guess in that particular environment, especially, because we're also students, we also are trying to study and still trying to figure ourselves out. But yet here you are given the responsibility of looking after these first years who are trying to navigate their own journey and trying to figure out what's right or wrong. And they look at you as, an older sibling or a person of responsibility who's going to give them all the answers. And so while it is so beneficial and rewarding to hold that sense of responsibility and be able to help in those meaningful ways, it's also a challenge to be like, is this, am I just saying this because it sounds like the right thing to do, or am I saying it because I've been through that myself and that's how I've learned? And so that's the other thing, is trying to figure out, what do I give them and what do I go, oh, you need to actually discover this for yourself. And that's probably the hardest challenge, because especially for me, I always want to just give people as much as I can give, but sometimes that comes at the detriment of them not learning for themselves that, there are going to be challenging times. There are going to be things that you just struggle with and you have to find yourself. So it definitely was that challenge, but it was very rewarding to be a part of that team. And that's where the team really bonded, was having those challenges. We would go, oh, I really want to help this person, but we knew that in the long run it wasn't going to be beneficial for them, even if they are, struggling right at that point in time.
And it's a tough one, right? It's a human nature. You want to help people, and you go, oh, I can't. Actually, you can't help everybody. You just have to find that one person that you want to help. And I guess in your case, Kat, your mom was on your side, so you want to do your thing, and your mom was your supporter, which we all need in our lives. We all need a. I've recently started using a phraseology that everyone should have a champion in their life, and I just think people need to find the champion. And when I speak to young people now, we always talk about, oh, don't be afraid to ask for help and blah blah blah. But that's a very negative connotation, and because people only seek help when things are going down. but if they find their champion, whoever the champion is, that means they'll talk to that person no matter what. And increasingly I find that when you find your champion, you're gonna whoever the champion is, they'll talk to you through the good times, and then when the bad times really happen, you'll know when the bad times are happening. So yeah, that's just changed my thinking. And like you've both said, if you find a person or people that back you, even though sometimes they shouldn't back you, but they still back you, and then they take you on the side and go, "What the hell are you thinking?" That's pretty cool. So okay, so you now navigate that. You're in community college, and you get your NCA. So for those of you that are listening to us out of New Zealand, to study tertiary in New Zealand, you have to complete NCA at a certain level before you can go to any tertiary. So Kat gets a tertiary, NCA, and you now have an option of going to tertiary. So you have a choice, because of what you want to do. You could go to university, you go to Polytech, you go to straight into an apprenticeship. What made you choose to go to a Polytech, or to the Polytech, sorry?
Yeah, so I chose Otago Polytechnic, one, because I'm born and bred in Dunedin and I didn't want to go too far. And when I was thinking about my learning style and coming from such an isolated classroom, if you want to say that, and going into the likes of university, it would be such a shell shock and daunting experience for me personally, going from what I had known. So I decided that Polytech was my best route because it was more hands-on per se, smaller class sizes, and you got to know the lecturers more on a one-on-one personal element. You had a couple of hours with them each lecture. You could utilize the class time with them as much as you could possibly, and it felt more comfortable to me going from homeschooling to Polytech instead of a university sense, because I felt like that was really throwing me out of into the deep end, and potentially not allowing my best interests at heart to come out to play for my learning experience. So that's why I chose Otago Polytechnic.
I have to acknowledge your awareness, Kat. Awareness at 8 for religion, awareness at 17 for what you want to do, and again the awareness of what's the right learning style for you. And I say that because as you know, I work with a lot of young people, and a lot of young people choose to go where their friends are going, because in this world of FOMO, they're like, oh, if I don't go to XYZ, I'm going to lose out. And I guess in your case, you didn't have FOMO because your friend group was much smaller, but the awareness for yourself was probably higher than that, which is really, really awesome to see coming through. So you then do the Polytech journey. How long was that, and what are your highlights in that little journey there?
So I did a diploma in marketing to dip my toes in to understand what I actually wanted out of marketing first and foremost. And then I moved into the degree. So that was a 3-year degree. So in total, 4 years at Otago Polytechnic. And I think overall the highlights that have come out of it is just finding my own voice. I know I was a timid little thing when I first started out, and I probably in some cases didn't actually come across that timid because I was going from such an isolated scenario into the big wide world, in the sense of dipping my toes into tertiary education. But it was finding my voice and being able to get into that realm where I could understand more about myself. And throughout those 4 years, it was such a progressional thing of going from my first year being like, what is this? I don't know. I'm just going with the flow, to, second and third year being like, oh, I'm kind of finding my feet. I'm going through some motions of, the friends and the boyfriend, and, all of the fun stuff that you have to navigate throughout doing study. And it's been one of those things that got me to the point where even on my graduation day, I was like, regardless if it was bad, and I had good moments as well, it got me to understand so much more of people as a whole, but also who I was, and understanding why people do certain things and why you do certain things. But it was just an eye-opening experience, I think.
And it's so awesome because you speak about why others do things, but I think the key phrase is why we do things. I think a lot of us, we focus on how do we affect others, but the internal learning is where it all starts. And as you do the internal learning, then your outward exposure changes quite a bit. So that's great awareness. Again, awareness seems to be really quite, it seems to be the thread that's going through, which is really, really, really awesome. Because as I said before, not all of us have awareness. Even, you get to 40, 50, 60, and all of us have awareness until something happens. You go, oh, actually, I better be aware. Something disrupts your life, and you go, oops, awareness, I didn't see that happening. And we spoke about all the good stuff. And what a lot of our guests have spoken through some testing times they've had when they've been doing tertiary, whether it's polytech or university or gap years or whatever. What are some of the defining, I guess, trials that you had that you go, man, that really just changed me for good, for better, or for worse, whatever the situation is?
So within my learning style, I am terrible with numbers, and I didn't understand maths. That was my worst topic with my mum. I would get into fights with her and be like, I don't care if you're my teacher or your mum, like I'm not learning maths. And when I got into my degree, part of the core papers that you have to do is accounting and economics. And I completely got into my own head in my first year of studying and flunked both of them. And that was simply because I wasn't putting myself forward to apply myself. I automatically was like, I know I'm going to fail. So I didn't attend the lectures. I completely gapped it and obviously failed. And I knew down the line I was going to actually have to sit the papers again if I wanted to get my degree. And we got 2 years in and I had to resit them again. And my mindset shifted from, okay, how am I going to achieve this? Because one, I'm by myself, and two, I'm in my head. So I reached out to my brother's friend, who was actually a chartered accountant, and got tutoring from her. And from that point, I felt way more confident in attending the lectures and then actually doing, the mahi behind it to actually get me across the line. And my accounting paper actually was one of the best papers that I actually ever got with my grade. I got an A out of it. So I think that was probably one of the testing moments, but also got me into a positive state at the end of it. So yeah, flunking a paper and then also going down the line and actually getting it was probably the best part about my experience.
And that's so
it
crazy.
showed, it showed just how much I could actually achieve if I applied myself.
Yeah, and I think the crazy thing about that is that you had already failed before you even started. You told yourself you'd fail before you even started. And I think a lot of us do that. We don't do things because we're not good enough. We tell ourselves we're not good enough, or we are going to fail before we even start. And we all do that. I mean, there's no perfect person. I was listening to a podcast just before with David Goggins. If you haven't heard him, he's amazing. And he speaks about how when he gets up in the morning, everyone thinks that he loves running. He's a beast. But in the morning, he wakes up and looks at his shoes and he goes, I don't want to be here. I don't want to run. He uses strong language. I don't want to run. And he looks at his shoes for half an hour before he decides that he wants to run, But at that point, he could have just been, no, I'm going back to bed. And, and just lived his next day. And I think, it's great for us to all go, hey, this happens, but what do you do to negate that? How do you reframe that? And your reframing was, hey, if I can't do it, let's go to an expert. And one thing that I've learned over the last few years is if you try and talk to the people that are doing what you want to do, because 9 times out of 10 they're going to help you, and if they don't, then they're dicks. So you find someone else that's going to help you, right? But everyone has started in the same at some point has been the same level. So that's really awesome that your brother's friend was like, cool, let's get that accounting A, and boom, happy days. And then you finish up your program, which is awesome, well done. And now you're on the job hunt. Was that hard for you, or were you snapped up pretty quickly? Because it is scary. Like Tane, for example, who's graduating next week and he's doing honors. But at some point you go, okay, cool. You celebrate the moment and you go, what's next? What is that like for you? Because you had obviously you'd done your homeschooling, what next? You've gone to community college, what next? I've gone to Polytech, cool, what next?
Yeah, well, it was definitely a daunting element knowing a month out that, you're about to graduate, you're done with study, and you're like, well, what's next? And for my situation, I was actually working at Sunglass Hut in retail, and I knew I was going to have at least work, but not enough work to tide me over. So I started on the job hunt in terms of marketing, and I didn't necessarily want to go outwards in the sense of leaving Dunedin, and I wanted to stay in Dunedin if I could. So within that time period, there was a couple of jobs going for marketing and entry-level marketing roles, and I applied for everything, as well as retail positions in terms of managerial because of my degree being applied management. And I actually stumbled across two particular individuals that actually worked at the university while I was working a shift at Sunglass Hut, and they knew someone within the marketing team, and there had actually been a position open up that day, and my CV got passed along the desk that particular day that the CV got passed along. And yeah, I kind of got snatched up in the sense of having a quick interview and then got offered a internship right at the beginning of 2020, so a month out from graduating. And from there, obviously, the world went into turmoil and we went into lockdown. But I had a 4-month internship, which ended in April. But before we actually went into lockdown, I got offered the permanent position as marketing coordinator in the marketing team at the university. So it was a whirlwind experience. And obviously, we all were going through every emotion possible, but I was just stoked that I was permanent. So I went about it that way. So I was very, very lucky in the sense of right place, right time, right people, and the experience that I had put under my belt in terms of marketing. I was doing social media marketing part-time with a couple of individuals that I know, and that set me apart from particular people that had passed their CV along to my current manager. And I think elements of also my CV showing that I was homeschooled, I went through, tertiary education, I was in retail, and I had that customer service side of things really played a part in me, securing my current, well, now previous position, but my current role at the university.
Yeah, and what a whirlwind, like you said, you're standing at Sunglass's Hut, and you have a conversation with some people, and then the next minute you have an interview. And I guess, which is really cool. I think, but what happens is now you're a marketer. Your job is to be out there doing some pretty cool things and learning about cool stuff. But then lockdown happens, and you can't actually do that. What is that like for you in two ways? We'll go with in terms of your role, and then we'll go into personal life for you. What is it like for you as a marketing intern, where obviously marketing is getting out there, doing research, doing it at your competitors or whatever, and now you do it at home? How does that work for you? Given it's your first gig, real gig.
I know, it was my first real job in the real world. As along my career path, it was very daunting, but my environment that I was living in, I was surrounded by individuals that were in careers of their own. So I had structure in place, and the team that I was working with in the marketing team were guiding me as a young graduate, which was so humbling to be a part of, because I was like a little lamb being led. I had no idea. And learning particular processes and procedures really established my grounding point within being a marketer, and getting that kind of lockdown whilst in lockdown was actually really helpful to understand what was expected of me to be able to go about the marketing that we needed. And we actually got to work alongside Prajesh actually when we were in lockdown, because part of my portfolio was to take care of the schools liaison team, which is Prajesh's current role as well, and we had to think up on the spot how we could potentially reach, our prospective students and make them feel like they were still connected whilst also, being locked away per se. And we had to come up with very innovative ways of getting our material out there, and we created a video. So we started to come up with some plans, and it was very, very interesting in how we actually conducted the new way of marketing. And I think the first couple of months we really didn't know what we were doing. We were just trying to do our best, and I think that was what everyone was trying to do. But I think, again, it's probably one of those things that's monumental in our history, that in our marketing history, that we've been able to do some strange things, but also look back on them and be like, it was a starting point to grow even bigger to where we have gotten now.
Yeah, totally. I think lockdown was an interesting time. Well, I mean, it's interesting because it could be good or bad. Interesting time, and I think for you, if you look back, that's probably the best thing to happen for you in terms of your role, because everyone has to be innovative. And like you said before, you were already a bit away with the whole social media world, so your skill set now comes to the fore, as opposed to, universities are very slow at taking on new technologies, but now they had no choice. This is the way the world works, or was going to work. So your skill set now changes. You actually have your skill set which you can contribute and go, actually, hey, this is my jam. And like you said before, we did some pretty innovative and crazy creative things because we had to think out of the box at that point in time, while we're navigating life as well at the same time, because this is a crazy time, and I think for everybody, you especially for those of us that are working, you have to navigate work, plus you have to navigate being at home in lockdown. What is that like for you personally? And I asked that question because isolation was a key theme for you growing up. Well, isolation, I'm going to use that word loosely.
Yeah.
And now you are isolated in a whole different way. What is that like for you?
Funny enough, I was probably the worst one out of the household that I was isolating with. I isolated with 3 other individuals, and they were fine. I was not. I needed to get out for walks. I felt trapped, and I think it was probably going back to the fact of always being at home and being isolated with homeschooling, and going to that point of switching my mindset from being a student to a young professional in this industry was so like it was just like a spiraling effect of being like, well, okay, I need to get into this mindset of routine and understanding my role, and providing the skill sets that I had built up to that point for clients within that portfolio that I had doing marketing. And it was strange because I personally, on the other side of things, I was struggling with it. I needed to ground myself and get into exercise, and it was probably one of those confronting situations like most people had. You had to slow right down. You didn't have your normal day-to-day. You had to go inward, and you had to figure out what was going to be best for you to get through that situation, because there was so much going on and it was doom and gloom. Like, we didn't know what was happening. This was the first situation for most people to experience, and I, like probably most people, were like, are we going to die? Like, I don't know what's going to do. I'm going to wash all my groceries and have a shower once I get home. And it was a very scary time. But alongside that, also starting in my career in the first couple of months. So it was a very turbulent year with many trials and tribulations, but I feel like those are the best scenarios to go through as an individual to get you to the next growth in your stage. It just propels you forward so much more.
Yeah, and that was a surreal time. When you think about it, 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, whatever it was pretty surreal, where you're washing your vegetables and you can't talk to people on the street. Just that the whole, I mean, like you said, nobody knew what was going on. We all thought we were going to die. Everyone watching the news every day to go, is there a case? Oh, what's going on? And we look back now and go, haha, that was pretty funny. But actually, at that point in time, it was not funny at all, and it was pretty scary for us all. And as you go through that, Tony, it was different for you because, Kat and I were in the working world, but it was different for you because it was your first year of being a student, which is a whole different ballgame altogether. We've spoken about it a few times before, but when you reflect right now, what do you think about? What is the biggest thing for you, I guess, at that time? The biggest challenge, I guess.
I guess my biggest challenge was not getting to have the first year experience that I wanted. We just got. It probably coincided with the time
Just
where
blame the marketers, Tane. Blame the marketers. They marketed this whole thing to you, and it didn't happen, right? That's what I'm going to say.
I'm sorry.
plant the stream and then it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was probably the hardest thing was, we'd just settled down, we'd just found our friend groups, and then it was kind of like, well, most of us were going home now and we didn't know how long for, we didn't know what the struggles were. And I guess moving online, because the university also had never experienced being online, we were just the guinea pigs, and we were just kind of like, well, we don't know any different. But at the same time, the lecturers, you could tell some were more confident than others. You could tell that there were just people stressed about everything. And so it just kind of compounded all the stress that you didn't necessarily need. But I guess at the same time, probably my biggest learning was that sometimes you just have to keep going. Like I said at the start, when you get in the slump, you have to keep going. It was kind of the same in COVID. I took it as the challenge to be like, okay, if I can stick to watching my lectures and doing some study, it's not the best outcome. It's not what any of us actually wanted, but if I can push through and carry on through this, not many people can. And so that was my probably biggest takeaway. And that's what I've reflected on is, there's so many times where we get hit with a barrier or get hit with something that we didn't necessarily see coming and we go, oh, this sucks. But being able to push through it is what really is the meaningful impact in the whole thing. It's not necessarily the fallback of, oh, this sucks. It would be easy to just go, oh, okay, this sucks. I'm not gonna carry on because what's the point? I've hit this barrier. What's the point in carrying on? But sometimes that's the greatest accomplishment. It's not the end goal. It's not, getting all the things that you always wanted, but it's just pushing through and actually being like, okay, I actually challenged myself to carry on when life wasn't that great, or I had a huge challenge that wasn't, seemed impossible, but I pushed through, and that's what really matters.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think about that, right? The challenges, and yeah, I just smile when I think about that time there, and the whole different worlds. Time just got lost, really. Time got lost. But we won't dwell about that. I'm sure we'll have lots of time to talk about COVID in our as we get older and older and older. Like, oh, 2020, what happened? So you did a fantastic job with us there, Kat, and I have to acknowledge you and your team for what we did there. We came up with some crazy ideas. And we're going to fast forward a little bit. So, because there's lots for us to cover. And I want to talk about your next biggest thing that you got thrown onto, or actually got selected to do, was to be part of the undergrad campaign at the university. What is that like for you? Because you go from making videos for Schools Liaison, which are tiny, to actually being part of this amazing campaign. What is that like for you? And how did you feel as a person?
First of all, I want to say we did more than just make a video for you. We did
Oh,
much more for you.
You did tons. You did tons of stuff for us. Yes, sorry, I'm negating that.
So much.
You did
And
tons. You did tons. Exactly.
Would always come down and get your lollies as well. So
yes, exactly. Yes, yeah.
No,
yes,
so
you did tons for us. I just wanted to scale what you did for us to where you went. I was like, wow.
do a couple
crazy.
of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think going from understanding sponsorships and schools liaison and then moving all the way into understanding the undergraduate campaign was a massive step forward for my professional growth, and one that I think a lot of team members within marketing and advisory were pushing me to do, which was in my best interest. And I think it was probably my imposter syndrome coming out, being like, I can't do that. That's way too large to do. That's a big responsibility. And I think having people in my court pushing me forward was amazing. In particular, my colleague Mon, she was like, this is great for you. This is going to be amazing. Push forward, get into this. And the team that we have, they set me up for absolute success, and I know that I could ask them anything in the way of campaign work, because I had done very small scaled campaigns in the way of, you know, social media and doing in-house campaigns, but not to the large scale of working with a media agency. And I think going through such a year like 2022 for me this year has been like just constant upwards. It's been on that upward scale, and I can only thank the people in my team that have gotten me through that, because it was a crazy period where I got lumped with a lot because of particular circumstances with our team. You know, COVID was still rampant. People were still getting unwell. There was family circumstances, and I had to execute the entire dispatch of the undergraduate campaign alone. And obviously, I did still have the team of what we had in terms of specialists and coordinators supporting me, but I did a lot of early mornings and late nights, and I definitely burnt myself out. But again, it was one of those things where you just get chucked into the deep end, and it's like baptism by fire. If you can come up, you can, you know, go through anything afterwards. And from those experiences, I'm such a more skilled and insightful marketer for what I've gone through this year. And understanding the undergraduate process and, you know, the prospective students that we market for, it has opened up my understanding even more so around the psyche and, you know, the consumer, and what you actually need to delve into to secure, you know, prospective students coming to a university. And yeah, it's catapulted my learning, hopefully, towards getting into higher roles in the future. But yeah, it was a challenging one, but yeah, very thankful for it.
Oh, I can imagine, and I think that, like, you know, like I said before about champions, you had champions on your side, which number one believed in you to actually go for the role, and number two supported you through the trying times, you know. And nothing in life happens without champions, and you've got your amazing champions there. Not to say that life is easy, and it wasn't easy for you, because as you said before, early mornings and late nights to get a product, because there's a deliverable that you have to achieve, and sometimes, well, you have your champions, but you've got to do the mahi. You know, they'll be there to back you, but you've actually got to do the mahi. You don't do the mahi, even your champions will be like, okay, cool. Don't know if I'm going to be a champion anymore. Exactly. See you later. We're tapping out. But one thing that you touched there, which I think we're going to shift away from the marketing world and talked about Kat's world. You spoke about through the conversation, spoken about finding yourself. You've spoken about almost getting burnt out. How do you start looking after yourself, and where did your inner journey start happening? Because, you know, you mentioned exercise when you're locked down, and just the internal work. What has that been like for you?
It's been an interesting one, because I've been one of those people that would stomp it out and not want to face it. And I definitely stomped it out and didn't want to face it, especially during study. But I think there was a particular turning point in my life where I was like, right, okay, I am not doing the things that I probably should be in terms of my mindset, because I noticed I wasn't probably performing as well as a person, as a friend, and as a colleague probably at one point, probably a year and a half ago. And by delving into self-help and understanding what I needed to provide my cup to be able to provide others, it just got me to understand more about what my purpose was and what I wanted to actually achieve out of my life personally, rather than just doing the tertiary and going into the career.
Still work, yeah.
So yeah, it was very interesting. But I think having my routines in place and understanding what my triggers are, and, you know, all those things, and journaling about it and being self-aware and reflecting has hopefully gotten me to a point where I don't burn out as much as I used to. Because, as like we have mentioned, I was doing very early mornings and late nights, and those particular scenarios can burn one individual out, but having the support that I had within my team, and also going through those experiences of delving into what I needed to do with my background, has allowed me to keep a continuous momentum.
Do you mind if I ask what the turning moment was? What is that pivotal moment that made you go, actually, things have got to change?
So, well, yeah, I had a breakup a couple of years ago, and I was like, I'm not the person that I want to be, and who I should be is what I probably see my higher self being. And I think going off the rails and just doing whatever it was to be self-destructive really was quite confronting, and got me to a point where I was like, I don't want to let people down, but not just that, I don't want to now let myself down. And I could feel myself spiraling to a point, and I had to navigate that. And I got to almost the rock bottom situation. And I remember reflecting on my journal entries, being like, wow, that's such a different Kat to who I'm looking at currently to this day. And it's those turning points that really set you apart, where you step forward and go into the different directions. You always can take two paths, and I was faced with that crossroads, and I was like, I don't like the mindset that I currently have with going through the situation that I did with that particular person, and then not wanting to let people down, but again, not letting myself down. So I chose the path of going in a better direction.
And I guess, there's no good or bad. It's just a decision you make at that point in time. And at that point in time, that was the best decision for you to go, hey, I've had the situation. I'm going to go self-destruct. At that point in time, that was the best thing that you could think of. And then the best thing at that point in time was for you to go, hey, I'm going to stop and reflect and go, this is not what I want to do. And then you choose another pathway. But I guess as an outsider, it's like, cool. It's good that you went that way, to realize that's not the way you want to be. Because sometimes you don't do that, right? You don't do these things, and then you have no idea what you're missing out on, and you go like, cool. And that leads us to a great segue to your podcast. So let's talk about that there. So you started that, was that last year? I can't. Oh, when was the idea actually? Let's start with that thing. When did the idea actually spring into mind?
So the idea sprung to me last year. Probably more so when I was going through my absolute healing phase, where I guess I kind of went back to my isolation stage, where I was kind of out in the world, and then there was so much overwhelm, and I went back inwards, and I was like, what would be what I would want as a person who I was, like what I was going through. And I started to bounce ideas off my friends, being like, hey, would you listen to this kind of, concept for a podcast? It's a bit of a yarn. It's a little bit of, weirdness. It's also, tapping into the real nitty gritty traumatic experiences that I went through. So hopefully provide insight to particular individuals. And the Sad Single Girls podcast kind of started to come to life. And Sad Single Girls is an ironic term. It's not Sad Single Girls. And it's a community that I wanted to build up to hopefully, entice conversation around what people don't necessarily want to talk about, and also provide some random elements too.
I think I've listened to your podcast. I think they're great, and I think hey, if you keep on going, you could become as big as Girls That Invest. What a great podcast! Yeah. That could be you, right? In that world,
it's the goal.
It's the
and
goal,
we'll see.
exactly. And for our listeners out there, if they want to find your podcast, where can they find it?
So you can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcast, sorry, not Apple Music, Apple Podcast. And you can also find it on Instagram at Sad Single Girls Podcast.
Yeah, beautiful. So listeners out there, have a listen. There's some pretty cool things in there. And they're not as long as these sessions here. So they're nice and quick, and which is great. So this is important because you've got growth there, right? So now you have found your self-awareness, and you want to share that. And how has that been for you? Because, as we've done this podcast here, Tane and myself, I'm speaking for myself actually, not for Tane, I've just learned about myself and, this loss of awareness. What has that been for you as well, as you reflect back and think about those as you prepare your podcast?
I think being able to tap into this kind of medium for, allowing your voice to kind of shine was a very daunting situation. And again, it's probably like, do you have an opinion to provide? And I think once you get over that kind of stumbling block, it was one of those scenarios where it was like, oh, I actually have a lot to say on a particular topic, and I have a lot of experience to speak on. And obviously I'm 26, I've still got, a lot of life to live and a lot of experiences to go through. But, particular scenarios that I've gone through I can hopefully open particular people's minds up to a new way of thinking. And it's like opened my eyes up even further to having a community reach out to me, and not even, being girls and women. And I've had, guys reach out being like, I think what you were talking about is amazing. And I didn't actually see me going through a particular breakup and, me hurting in this way could, be seen in this light. And I think it's just opened a floodgate of conversation that wouldn't have previously been had from a particular perspective that I can provide. So I think, having this has been very eye-opening. And I think once I actually do get back into it, because there's been a bit of hiatus at the moment, obviously with the mahi that I'm putting in with my career, it's hopefully going to take off again. And it's one of the goals that I have set out for 2023 is to really build this up further and grow the community and touch on topics that, might be a little bit even more controversial, or even just a bit more random, a bit of a yarn. So hopefully that is going to be a propelling situation for people to continue conversation and hopefully build connections.
Yeah, we'll be looking out for it next year, January the 1st. That's right, January the 1st. Hey, Tane, I'm going to get... I'm just going to bring in Tane because Ivan and I spoke about my reflection, and we'll do a deep dive, I guess, later on. But what has been your great learning as we've done this podcast?
I guess just being comfortable with talking on a podcast and talking my opinion and not having to filter it, I think it's easier because you don't know who's listening to these podcasts. You could have your whole family, you could have all your friends, but you never know who you're talking to. And so it allows you to talk without that fear of judgment, or without that filter of, oh, I'm only going to say certain parts of the story because I'm worried that this person's not going to like what I'm saying or what I have to say. So that's really been the most enjoyable part. And again, having that self-discovery to realize the things that I do, that I am aware about, but also the things that I'm not aware about. And I think the journey each week, what I've really learned the most is that sometimes just because I think that I am aware of something doesn't mean I actually sit down and focus on it. And I think sometimes, we go, oh, that happened, that sucked, but I'm just going to carry on. It is what it is. I'm not going to let it, bother me. And then 2-3 weeks later, you go, oh, now I feel a bit down. I'm not doing exercise. What's happening? And then you go, oh, it's because I didn't actually touch on that. I just recognized it at the time and went, oh, that sucks, but I'm going to carry on. And I didn't actually go, okay, why am I feeling this way? How can I actually change how I feel about it, or at least acknowledge it, to go, okay, this is what's happened. I'm addressing it the way it is, and that's the way it is. So I guess that's been my biggest learning through the podcast for sure.
And it's crazy because it sort of resonates with what Kat just said about the imposter syndrome, but actually talking your opinion. Your opinion, it's quite funny because it's not an opinion that you want people to agree with. It's just your opinion, and people can agree or they can disagree with it. It doesn't actually matter. An opinion is not a fact. It's just your story, and each one of us has our lived experiences. It doesn't mean that it is experiences that everybody has, and people can take or listen to what they want. But I think the key thing that all three of us know is that everyone has a different story, and it makes us aware that, okay, hey, just because I went through this, it doesn't mean that everyone's going through this. Or hey, I went through this, and so are other people going through this here, because it's so easy to think about everything is internal. So it's been fantastic. Kat, we've been speaking for almost an hour and and a half almost, which is cool. And I just want to round up with I guess a question for you before we do our last question. A question for you. So you're now doing this inner work, and with this inner work, what is one of the things that has really been your go-to? You know, you spoke about journaling, exercise, going for walks. Is there one thing that's really just your thing? If you don't do that, it's just going to throw you off your day.
Goodness. I have so many. That's the problem.
Oh, that's all right. You
Um,
go on. Just go on with all of them, and we'll be here for the next 2 hours. It's cool. Don't worry about it.
no, we'll try and keep it to one. I think
or
for
a
me,
couple. I guess a couple for you.
um, yeah, I think probably at least the main one for me is journaling. I notice if I don't journal for a consecutive, couple of days, like I miss out on a journal entry, I am a bit all over the show. My mind isn't centered. I feel like I'm being pulled in all different directions, and I haven't got myself in a state of being grounded. And I think for the last year and a half, that's probably been my go-to. And I've gone through multiple journals, and it might just be as simple as this is what I've done for the day, like, or as deep as, what's the meaning of life? And it's it's the inner workings that have allowed me to ensure that I'm putting myself forward in the best light. So if I don't journal for a good consecutive couple of days, it's going to throw me off my game.
Yeah, the reason I think you were sharing that because I know there's lots of things that each of us does, but there's one thing that each of us does that if we don't do it, things change for us, right? And I think the key thing there is your consistency as well. Nothing happens if you're not consistent. And like I said, a year and a half of journaling is amazing, which is really, 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 a testament to your awareness again. Because some people they do stuff for 2 or 3 days. Oh, nothing's happening. Nothing happens in 2 or 3 days. you've got to keep working. I take my vitamins once a week. Yep.
I was going to say, I'm not going to lie. That's how I feel when I work out. I'm like, why is there no progress? But you have to chip away at it.
I was just going to use the whole workout thing. People go, I'm going to the gym once this week and I'll go once next week. Cool. What's going on? Why have I not gained my muscles?
Why is there no progression?
Exactly what is going on. Yeah. Progression takes time. Okay, we're coming to our last question now. As you know, our podcast is called Baskets of Knowledge, and you have shared a lot with us today, and there's a lot more we can delve into. I'd love for you to share one piece of knowledge that you'd love our listeners, and I guess Tanya and myself, to put into our basket of knowledge as we end this podcast through your experiences, either lived or thought. What would you like to share with our listeners?
Oh, I think from the experiences that I've gone through, to never take things personally. So that whether that be someone reacting in a particular way towards you, you don't know what they're actually going through. And I think understanding, and I'm sorry, there's a dog barking. I think
it's taking it personally. Taking
it's the real raw experience, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The dog is taking it personally. That's what's happening. Yeah.
I know. I'm like, okay, I get it. But yeah, I think because I've played on so many situations where I've been like, why has this person treated me this way? When probably deep down, it's actually a lot deeper to the meaning of what's going on in their life. So I think not necessarily taking things personally, and just staying true to yourself and trying not to doubt yourself.
Yeah, I mean, those are fantastic learnings. Don't take everything personally, especially in a work sense. And I think that really plays into a work sense or a study sense. As you know, people go through. Everyone is going through their own little journey. And like you said, don't doubt yourself. Which is the biggest one. We doubt ourselves every single day. And I'm going to push this. Find a champion that's going to help you get all the doubt there. Thank you so much, Kat, for sharing that. Tanya, any last words for Kat?
I think just touching on that doubts thing as well, I guess something I've learned over this last week being in that slump is that if you do have doubts, don't let them compound. You might not get a role or not have something that goes your way, but it doesn't mean that everything else in your life has to suddenly be a negative as well. You know, I was still exercising all the time. I was still, you know, doing my meditation. I was still doing all these other cool things that, you know, I do enjoy and that make me happy. But instead I turned the narrative and went, oh, just because this one thing didn't go my way, everything else sucks. I'm not enjoying my exercise. I don't want to go for a run. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And it just compounds and it makes you feel worse than you actually should. So I guess, you know, just finding that way. And I know it's hard. It's easier said than done. But if you can just find a way to go, okay, this is only one part of my life. And I was listening to another podcast today, and I was saying, you know, if you think of scaffolding, if you've only got one leg that you put all your weight on, as soon as that one leg's gone, you're gone, because that's what your identity is. But if you have all these different legs that you branch out on, whether it's sport, whether it's music, whether it's cooking, I don't know, whatever your hobbies are, whatever what makes you, if there's one thing that's gone, it's all right, because you've got all these other platforms that you can adjust yourself on and go, okay, these platforms are still holding up and I can just rebuild this one. And I think that's so important, because as I say, it's so easy to just go, okay, one thing's not going my way, so I'm going to let it topple, you know, I'm going to let it domino and I'm going to let it affect the rest of my life, which isn't, you know, it's not healthy.
Yeah, and you know that's so true. But human nature, we always focus on the one negative thing. It'll always ruin us, right? And it's really hard, but it takes awareness to do that there, to see the good stuff around you. Kat, thank you so much for being on this podcast today. It has been my absolute pleasure and honor for you to jump on today. I've learned so much about you, and thank you for sharing your story. Yeah, it's been really awesome. And to our listeners out there, thank you for listening to another episode and another fantastic story from another amazing guest. Again, as always, without you, this podcast would last. So please feel free to share, like, and comment. And don't forget to put something into your basket of knowledge. Till next time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Baskets of Knowledge.
Yeah, we hope that you found something useful to put into your basket of knowledge. And as we said before, remember to put something little into your baskets of knowledge every week. And as always, feel free to like, comment, and share this podcast. Thanks, everybody. Bye.